Okay, I want to start today with a little experiment. No equipment needed, just you. If I asked you right now to point to where anxiety lives in your body, like physically, where do you feel it? Where does your hand go?
That is a really fascinating way to begin.
Right, because I tried it on myself, and my hand, it just instinctively went to my forehead. Or maybe my neck. I think for most of us, we point somewhere up here.
Of course.
We think of anxiety as, racing thoughts, that mental loop, the worry list that just will not shut off at 3 in the morning, a neck-up problem.
Completely. That's the conventional wisdom, isn't it? The mind is this separate thing floating apart from the machinery of the body.
But for this deep dive, we're looking at a stack of notes that just completely flips that script. The source material argues that anxiety, well, it might start in the mind, but it definitely does not stay there.
Then it goes on a road trip.
It goes on a road trip, and its favorite destination where it decides to set up camp seems to be the digestive system.
Specifically the colon.
The colon. Now, I know what you're thinking. Great, a whole deep dive on the colon.
It's not exactly the most glamorous topic we've ever covered.
Maybe not glamorous, but based on the research we have here, it's probably one of the most universally relatable topics we've ever touched on. Because if you have a brain and you have a gut, you've dealt with this connection.
Exactly. So the mission today is sort of twofold. We've got these articles, these medical notes. First, we need to unpack the biology of it, the mechanics of the mess, as I'm calling it.
Okay.
Why does your stomach decide to just revolt right before a big presentation? Or why does one stressful week completely wreck your digestion?
Right. We want to move beyond just it happens to how it happens.
But secondly, and I think this is the real emotional core of the research, we want to validate that experience.
Yeah.
Because the source material uses this phrase that really stuck with me. It says the colon is highly sensitive to what we feel. That is such a profound connection. And you hit on something crucial there, validation. I was looking through the notes, and there's this recurring theme. Patients go to doctors with just, severe stomach pain, cramps, things that are ruining their quality of life. They get all the scans, the blood work, and the doctor comes back and says, essentially, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just stress.
It's just stress, which in our heads translates to, it's all in your imagination. Go home.
Precisely. It feels so dismissive.
Yeah.
But what we're finding in this text is that, well, the trigger might be in your head, but the pain is very much in your gut. It's a physiological reality.
Not an imagined one.
Not at all. The source material is so clear on this. It's a biological reaction, not a character flaw.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty mechanics of this, because I think a lot of people just assume it's a metaphor, oh, I have butterflies. But the source material describes anxiety as something that physically travels.
It's a cascade effect, and to understand it, you really have to look at how the body prioritizes resources.
Let's do it.
It's evolutionary.
Okay.
When the mind perceives a threat, and that could be a literal tiger thousands of years ago, or, a passive-aggressive email from your boss today.
The body doesn't know the difference.
Not really. The alarm system is identical. The source explains that the body releases this flood of stress hormones. We're talking about cortisol, adrenaline.
The heavy hitters.
The heavy hitters, yeah. And these hormones, they aren't just floating around. They have a target. They're like direct commands to different systems in the body.
And the instructions aren't, keep up the good work digesting lunch.
Definitely not. Digestion takes a huge amount of energy. So if you're running from that tiger, the body basically says, stop wasting energy on that sandwich. We need to survive.
The text mentions actual physical changes. It says these hormones change how the gut moves, how it tightens.
And tightens is the key word. I mean, think about what happens to your shoulders when you're stressed.
Oh, they go right up to my ears. They become rocks. I'm literally doing it right now, just thinking about it.
Right. You hunch up, you get rigid. The source suggests that a very similar tension happens internally. The gut reacts by changing its motility and its muscle tone.
Motility, that's a word that comes up a few times. Can we break that down?
Sure. In plain English, it's just the speed at which things move through the system. Digestion it's a rhythm. It relies on this gentle, coordinated squeezing to move everything along, like a conveyor belt.
And stress hormones just break the conveyor belt.
They throw a wrench right in the gears. Stress hormones, they tend to do one of two things. They either hit the accelerator or they slam on the brakes.
Which brings us to the symptoms. And I was reading this section, just nodding along. I imagine anyone listening will recognize this. The source lists cramps, bloating, constipation, or that sudden urgency.
It creates a really chaotic environment. If the hormones hit the accelerator, the colon spasms, it tries to evacuate everything immediately. That's the flight part of fight or flight.
Dump the cargo so we're lighter.
It's a terrifyingly accurate way to put it. It's crude, but it's pure biology. Then on the flip side, if the hormones cause the muscles to just seize up and freeze, everything stops.
And that's the painful bloating and constipation.
That's it. The conveyor belt has stopped, but you're still putting food on it.
It's just so interesting because we use these cutesy terms for it, like you said, butterflies in my stomach. But reading this, butterflies feels like a massive understatement.
It is a huge understatement. Butterflies implies this fluttery, maybe nervous, excited feeling. What this source is describing is a functional disruption. It's the difference between a little flutter and a full-blown seizing up of the machinery.
The tension in your thoughts becomes tension in your tissues.
That's exactly it. When the text says, when the mind is tense, the colon often follows, it's describing a mirroring effect.
Which brings us to this big scientific term that's all over the notes. It sounds very, lab coat, but it's central to this whole thing, the gut-brain axis.
Yes, the axis. This is where the science gets really cool.
Okay, so break it down. What does the source mean by that? Is it just a metaphor?
No, not at all. It's a physical hotline. The gut-brain axis is the direct communication line between your central nervous system, your brain, and something called the enteric nervous system.
Okay, enteric nervous system.
Yeah. You know how scientists often call the gut the second brain?
I have heard that. I always thought it was just because it looks kind of squiggly, like a brain.
Well, it does a bit. But no, it's called the second brain because the lining of your gut is embedded with hundreds of millions of neurons. It has its own neural network.
Wow.
It produces neurotransmitters, just like your brain. In fact, a huge percentage of your body's serotonin is actually made in the gut, not in the head.
So when we say gut feeling, we aren't just being poetic.
Not in the slightest. There is literal neural processing happening down there. And the gut-brain axis is the fiber optic cable connecting the two brains.
It's not like the brain sends a letter and maybe the gut reads it a week later.
No, it's instant messaging. The text says what you think and feel directly affects how your digestion behaves. It's treating your thoughts as direct instructions.
Instructions.
Okay.
It's okay. So if I'm at my desk thinking, I'm so unprepared, this is going to be a disaster, my gut isn't hearing, I'm worried. It's hearing
Use hearing, emergency, threat detected, evacuate. Or maybe freeze, play dead.
That is wild. Your colon is basically eavesdropping on your internal monologue.
Pretty much.
Huh.
And the source points out specific contexts where this connection just flares up. It lists stressful days, important events, or emotional pressure.
Which is just modern life, basically.
For a lot of people, yes. And that's why this is so relevant. We're not talking about some rare condition. We're talking about the body's standard operating procedure under pressure.
There's a line in here that I want to highlight because I think it is the most validating sentence in this whole stack of notes. I actually circled it twice. It says, the pain feels real because it is real.
That's the entire crux of it.
So why do we need to hear that so badly? Why is that so pivotal?
It's because of that stigma we touched on. In medicine, there's a tendency to separate the structural from the functional. If a doctor looks at your colon and sees a tumor, that's structural. They can see it, they can fix it.
Okay.
But with these stress-induced issues, the structure is fine. The colon looks perfectly normal on a scan.
So they tell you you're fine.
Right. But the function is broken. The way it's moving is all wrong. And because the doctor can't see the pain on an x-ray, the patient often feels like they're being told they're crazy. But this source corrects that narrative. It says, anxiety doesn't imagine discomfort, it creates it.
And that distinction is just, it's vital.
It is. You are not imagining the cramp. The cramp is happening. Your muscles are physically spasming. The bloating is physically distending your abdomen. The cause is just neural, not bacterial. But the pain is 100% real.
That's going to be a huge relief for so many people to hear. You aren't crazy.
Yeah. But.
And this is where the plot thickens. The notes say this isn't a one-way street. It's not just the brain yelling at the gut. The gut talks back.
And this is where it gets really tricky to manage. The connection works both ways. The source calls it a feedback loop.
Okay, let's unpack that loop. So, brain gets stressed, gut gets messed up. What happens then?
Well, imagine your gut is cramping. It hurts. You're in a quiet meeting, maybe. You feel that bubbling.
Oh, total panic mode. Do I need to leave? Is it obvious?
Exactly. The gut doesn't just suffer in silence. It sends distress signals back up that fiber optic cable to the brain. It says, hey, something is wrong down here. Be alert.
Oh, great. So now the brain has its original anxiety plus this new report from the gut.
Precisely. The source calls it a cycle of tension and discomfort. It says anxiety increases gut symptoms, and then the gut symptoms increase the anxiety.
It's a spiral.
It's a self-perpetuating spiral. You're anxious about the meeting, your stomach starts to hurt, now you're anxious about the meeting, and you're anxious that you might have to run to the bathroom during the meeting.
Which makes the stomach hurt even more.
And it makes you even more anxious.
That's just unfair. It feels like a trap you can't get out of.
It can feel that way. And I think the expert analysis here is that without awareness, you can get stuck in that loop for years. You might treat the stomach with antacids, but you ignore the anxiety.
Yeah.
Or you treat the anxiety, but the stomach pain keeps triggering more stress. You have to address the cycle itself.
So how do we break it? The source material transitions here from the problem to the solution. And it starts with that word you just used, awareness.
Yes. You have to see the loop before you can stop it. You have to be able to pause and just ask, okay, my stomach hurts. Is it the food I ate, or is it because I have a huge deadline in an hour?
Just asking the question is the first step.
Exactly. But beyond that, the source offers some very specific, actionable techniques. And what I love is that they're not complicated medical procedures. They're lifestyle shifts.
Let's go through them. The first word is breathing, slow breathing. Now, we hear take a deep breath all the time. But is there an actual mechanism there for digestion?
There is. It's not just a distraction. It's about that axis. The text says slow breathing calms the nervous system. If you think about those hormones triggering fight or flight, well, slow breathing is the manual override.
It's the all-clear signal.
That's a perfect way to put it. Physiologically, when you breathe slowly and deeply, you stimulate something called the vagus nerve. That's the main line on the gut-brain axis. It tells the body, we are safe, the tiger is gone, stand down.
Okay, so the next one is about food, but not necessarily what you eat. It says, regular meals create safety for the gut.
I love that they use the word safety.
Me too. It's not about metabolism, it's about safety.
It implies the gut is an organ that just craves predictability. Think about it. When you're anxious, you might skip lunch because you're busy, or you stress eat a bag of chips at midnight.
Guilty. My whole schedule goes out the window when I'm stressed.
And that erratic behavior, it signals chaos to the body. It doesn't know when the next meal is coming. So by creating a rhythm, feeding your gut at roughly the same times every day, you're sending this biological signal of stability. You're telling your colon, the environment is stable, you can relax.
The third technique is gentle movement. And it specifies gentle, not go run a marathon.
Right, which is an important distinction. High-intensity exercise is a form of physical stress. The source mentions movement to release tension.
Like walking or yoga.
Exactly. Walking, stretching. Again, think about how stress causes the gut to tighten. If you're sitting rigid at your desk all day, that tension gets locked in. Gentle movement helps to physically dissipate that held energy. It encourages all those muscles to just let go.
And then we get to what the source calls the most important factor, which brings us right back to where we started.
Learning to quiet the mind helps the colon relax.
It sounds so simple, and yet it's the hardest one.
It is, but the logic is, it's just irrefutable based on that gut-brain axis. If the brain is the source of the danger signals, then quieting the brain is the only way to permanently stop that bombardment. You can change your diet all you want, but if the command center is still screaming fire, the gut is going to keep reacting.
There's a statement here at the end that I think completely reframes this whole idea of self-care. It says, anxiety management is not a luxury. For the digestive system, it's a form of treatment.
That is the most critical takeaway. We see things like meditation or just taking a break as nice-to-haves, things we do when we have extra time.
Right. It's a spa day. I'll manage my anxiety after I finish this project. Or I don't have time to breathe. I have work to do.
We treat them as rewards. But this text is arguing that for someone with this sensitivity, anxiety management is medical. It's a form of treatment, just as necessary as taking medicine. You're not just relaxing, you're administering treatment to your digestive tract.
That is a massive shift in perspective. It gives you permission to prioritize your mental state because you're actually taking care of your physical health.
It validates the necessity of calm. When the source says, when the mind finds calm, the body follows, it's promising a resolution. It's saying the physical symptoms can be eased by treating the emotional root.
When anxiety softens, the colon often does too. It's such a great way to close the loop. We start with the mind stressing the body. We end with the calm mind healing the body.
Exactly. It just emphasizes that we're one system. We like to put things in boxes. This is my mental health. This is my physical health. But the gut-brain axis proves those boundaries are just illusions. It's all connected.
So if you're listening and you've been struggling with your stomach and you've tried every diet out there, maybe the missing ingredient hasn't been on your plate.
It's very likely. Maybe the missing ingredient is just looking at that connection and remembering that breaking that cycle, it just starts with awareness.
So we've got deep breathing, regular meals for safety, gentle movement, and quieting the mind. Not as luxuries, but as prescriptions.
Precisely.
I think we'll leave it there. But I do want to leave people with that final thought about treatment.
I agree. It changes everything.
It really does. So here's something to mull over. If we stop viewing anxiety management as mental self-care and start viewing it as necessary physical medicine for our digestion, how does that change the way you prioritize relaxation in your daily life?
It stops being something you earn and starts being something you require.
Something you require. I love that. Thank you for walking us through all this.
It was my pleasure.
And thanks to everyone for listening. Take care of your mind, and your gut will thank you. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.